Well, welcome to part two on our my lecture on the effects of global contact. So today we will dive into how early modern economies transformed as a result of expanding global trade, new business methods, and economic systems like mercantilism. These changes played a huge role in shaping the world we live in today. From the rise of capitalism and joint stock companies to the effects of colonialism, we'll explore how the pursuit of wealth impacted societies, governments, and individuals. And by the end of this lesson, you will understand how these ideas took hold and led to both prosperity and inequality. So, at the end of the lesson, these are the mastery check questions you should be able to understand. How to define mercantilism? How did mercantilism contribute to the success of Europe's commercial revolution? Define colonialism, and how did colonialism contribute to the success of Europe's commercial revolution? Expanding trade during this period encouraged the growth of capitalism, which is all about investing money to make a profit. While trade could be incredibly profitable, it was also risky. Imagine sending a ship loaded with goods to the Indian Ocean only to lose it in a storm or to pirates. These voyages took years and were fraught with danger, but if they succeeded, they would make investors very wealthy. And to manage these risks, new business methods emerged, and one of the most important of these was the joint stock company. Joint stock companies were a game changer for trade. Instead of one person bearing all of the risks, a group of people could invest in a single voyage. If the voyage was successful, they would share the profits based on how much they had invested. If it failed, they only lost what they put in. The system encouraged more investment and led to the creation of stock companies, where people could trade their shares in these ventures. But joint stock companies weren't the only way business was changing. Another new system was the putting out system, which revolutionized how goods were made. And the putting out system allowed entrepreneurs to bypass the traditional guild system that was set up during the Middle Ages, which controlled the production of goods in cities. Instead, merchants hired workers to make cloth or in their homes. The merchants would then buy the finished product and sell it in the city. This was the first time capital and labor had been separated, the merchants owning the capital and the workers being providing the labor. The system allowed for large-scale production, and it marked the beginning of the move away from small family-run businesses towards something closer to modern industry. And while these methods were changing, other economic change was developing in Europe as well: mercantilism. Now, mercantilism was an economic theory that saw a nation's wealth as being measured in the amount of gold and silver it had. The goal was simple: get as much treasure into your country as possible. This led to fierce competition between European nations as they sought to control trade and accumulate wealth. Under mercantilism, the more gold and silver a country had, the more powerful it was. One key way countries implemented mercantilism was through their colonies. In the mercantilist system, colonies existed for the benefit of the parent country. Colonies provided raw materials like cotton, sugar, and tobacco, which were then sent to Europe and manufactured into goods and sold back to the colonies. This allowed European countries to increase their wealth by controlling both the raw materials and the finished products. Colonists, however, were often forbidden from setting up their own industries or trading with foreign countries, keeping them dependent on the parent nation. Now let's see how governments used mercantilist policies to increase their national wealth. So rulers developed policies to maximize their country's wealth. One method was selling monopolies to producers, which guaranteed them a profit while giving the government a share in taxes or fees. Another strategy was imposing tariffs or taxes on imported goods to make them more expensive than local goods. This protected domestic industries and helped to ensure that foreign competition didn't undermine local production. These policies allowed governments to grow their revenues and increase their power. But what effect did this have on society? Let's take a closer look. European society was still very much divided into classes, but mercantilism started to shift the balance. New merchants grew wealthy and began to challenge the traditional social hierarchy. In cities, these merchants and their families enjoyed a higher standard of living than those in rural areas. Meanwhile, hired laborers and those serving the upper classes continued to live in medieval poverty, with little hope of upward mobility. The gap between the rich and the poor widened even as Europe's overall wealth increased. Now that we've explored capitalism and how mercantilism shaped the economy, let's recap what we've learned. So, in today's lesson, we've seen how expanding trade and the pursuit of wealth led to new business methods and economic systems. The growth of capitalism through joint stock companies and the putting out system allowed for more efficient production and investment. Meanwhile, mercantilism drove European nations to seek wealth through colonies and trade policies that benefited the mother country. These changes weren't without consequences. While some gained great wealth, many remained in poverty. As we continued studying this period, remember how these early economic developments laid the foundations for the modern global economy with both its opportunities and its inequalities. And thanks so much for joining us.